Patrick, or the Canucks a cup contender?
No. I mean, I think most people
Patrick, will the Canucks make the playoffs?
Yes. I'll say that.
There's been a big disparity. We were just saying off the air, like Dom Lucian and Jay Fresh Hockey both do their models, but then they just posted their vibe check predictions, just like pure gut instinct rather than their model. 11-point difference between two very smart guys that look at all the numbers and have access to numbers. So there's a lot of disparity as to what these Vancouver Canucks are.
What's the high end, low end?
99 for Lucian and 88 for Jay Fresh.
I mean, Jay Fresh's model, this was one of those moments where I talked to a few people in there. The model last week, I think, had the Canucks finishing like second or first in the division. And you're just like, this is one of those ones where sometimes you need to step back and say, is there something broken in my model? Because that's,
that's not nice.
You don't want to, but you don't want to do, like, you don't want to herd with everybody else. You want to have your information, whatever. But like, it was just such an outlier that 99, I think, is maybe a little high, but at the same time, that's what you need to get in the playoffs, and we say they're going to be a playoff team. So, I mean, the forward group is better than last year. I think see, what happens with the Rathbone aspect versus, say, Riley Stillman. Riley Stillman was the worst defenseman statistically on the Chicago Blackhawks last year. Obviously this team thinks he can be better in a different environment. We'll see.
Yeah. Your 2 cents then on the trade, the Dickinson trade from Friday night.
Well, I mean, it sort of stands out. There's a whole bunch of different things. I noted that in the end, they, obviously they get Riley Stillman, but they gave up 2 draft picks to have 62 games from Jason Dickinson. In the end, a total, a final total misfire from the previous regime. A guy who couldn't win faceoffs, he just didn't do anything. Like, it was kind of amazing how poor he was in the end, and they paid him a lot of money. And sometimes you miss those, but in the end, with the Benning era, there were just so many misses and so many overpays for players in that tier. The Canucks, they needed to find a way, and we saw it yesterday. I mean, kudos to them for having the most perfect salary cap ever structured if you're dealing with LTIR. They got the entirety of Michael Furlan's contract off the books, and that was part of the way they were able to do that. Was they shuffled numbers around. That was part of clearly in the end what they did. They're going to get a different look. They're going to get a defenseman. We've been talking, you need to get some different defensemen. I'm not sure anybody had Riley Stillman on their list, but they have gone and gotten a different defenseman who plays with, I think a little more bite, and that's certainly something they believe they needed.
Was there addition by subtraction? Like, do you have to subscribe to that? You get $1.5 million savings almost?
Yeah, there is an element there for sure. That is some of it. We'll see. I mean, Dickinson wasn't doing anything for you anyway. He wasn't probably going to play that much. Neil Zoman had won the job. So, they did get something out of a player they weren't going to be using, but as ever, giving up those draft picks is really tough. And, was it Cam Robinson pointed out, they've had 4, the number that they've had, somebody said they've had 4 second-round picks in the last 8 years. Like people have been trying to scoff at me at the value of second-round picks. I'm like, there are currently 4 second-round picks on the Canucks' roster.
Yeah.
And you look at like 2016, the year that, say, Riley Stillman was drafted, there's 31 guys picked in the second round, 20, or maybe I can't even remember when did Vegas have anyway, there's 24 players played in the NHL. Now, not every one of them has been a good player, but you get NHL players out of the second round. And someone tried to
if we're diminishing second round picks, why are we doing a draft past the first round then? Like, honestly, they're worth something.
So that's a tough reality, and it's something we learned over the last 7+ years. Is you just cannot take that round for granted. And right now, the Canucks are looking at it. I think they basically don't. They have almost no picks in the first. They've like 1 pick in the first or second round in each of the next 5 drafts. I can't remember what Cam's number was, but it's astounding. They have nothing close to what they should have at the top end of the draft, and that's how you're going to find all your best players.
Hughes is back at practice today, but no Myers, no Dermott. Looking at this defense corp, potentially Luke Schenn playing on the first pair with Hughes. However you slice it, they look to be a little deficient on the blue line. Chances that they just get off to a bad start like last year because of the missing defensemen, if not perhaps some missing forwards as well.
Yeah, and it is obviously. Tyler Myers, love him or hate him, he's, he is an NHL defenseman. He hasn't been an amazing NHL defenseman for the Canucks, but he is a lot better than the alternatives certainly they have in the system. That's a guy that's out. Dermott, they are very high on. Obviously, a tough loss with a player that has brought a dynamic that they didn't have a whole lot of. He's a guy that can move the puck and play smart hockey. That said, as someone who knows him well pointed out to me, said, "You're telling me Travis Dermott? I mean, he got a concussion, obviously, but you're telling me Travis Dermott got hurt? I'm shocked." Which has been that to go back. I think last week we talked about Brock Boeser. I mean, it's not necessary. I've never liked health as a skill because some of it is bad luck, but in the end, there are guys who just are better at staying healthy than others. And so it's a bit of a challenge. The thing that still stands out to me, and I've been noodling around a bit on this as part of my season preview stuff, and I'm going to do that later this week, is sort of 5 big questions. And one of them, 5 big questions about defense, 5 big questions about the forwards, 5 big questions about management. And in the defense section, I dial in on Tyler Myers, who has basically become a non-factor offensively in his career. And some of that's aging and some of that's been usage. But just in the end, like the guy making that much money, you need him to be producing more than they have. And, that is the big question mark on this defense. Can they produce more? Can they do more? And certainly that was the theory of perhaps putting OEL and Quinn Hughes together, because they could become sort of a dominant, especially offensively oriented, that they'll just spend all their time in the offensive zone, and you can see the idea. But right now they're not going to be that. And, Luke Shen is a, solid defenseman, but he's not a first pairing defenseman, as, I think you're implying there, Matt. And it's going to be a challenge. I mean, Jack Rath, again, it comes back to sort of, can Jack Rathbone spin some magic early on? And that's a lot to ask a kid who also really should just be a third pairing defenseman at this point. But can he make a difference? And can OEL actually, had a nice little season here last year. He wasn't the dominant OEL that he was in his younger days with Arizona, but he was okay. But they need more. They just need more from everybody, really. I mean, if they're going to be more than just a sort of toss and playoff team as everyone sort of seems to be concluding they are, they're just going to need more from that back end in general, and we'll see.
They need Brock Boeser to be Brock Boeser too. It looks like he'll start the season, which I don't know that we necessarily would have predicted when we had heard news of surgery on his hand. I'll believe Brock Boeser's Brock Boeser when I see him shooting and scoring, of course. I am worried about a hand surgery for a shooter he's not a great skater, as we know. So that is his bread and butter, those hands. You're all worried this is going to mean a slow start for a guy they need to get going.
Yeah, we don't really we don't really know what the injury was. But yeah, certainly a shooter. He's skating with JT Miller and Tanner Pearson. And, Miller is such a great passer. To me, it should be a great pairing. I worry, I like Tanner Pearson, but the idea that Tanner Pearson's on what is in theory your first line raises my eyebrows. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking for Brock Boeser to hit the ground running, I mean, this is the centerman to be playing with, and a guy who will get him the puck, and he's going to have to, this is it. I mean, Boeser told J-Pat, this is the year I'm going to get 30 goals. And, sure. You worry a little bit, are they rushing him back, especially as a guy that this is, his hands are everything. Yeah. But the progress has been quite solid. And, even any surgery where they say it's only going to be, 3 weeks, it's not a substantial thing, but it's repairing something. And it's all about how quickly you heal. And it's not at least in this case, I mean, Boeser was guilty of trying to come back earlier before in his career when he had, he's had soft tissue injuries and things like that. This, at least, as far as we know, is in a soft tissue injury, I guess.
Yeah. How long do you think the leash is on Boudreau?
I mean, I think he's kind of said it himself. I think back to a quip he made in the spring when he said, if basically, if we aren't winning, that's terrible for me. I mean, I think it's kind of November. I mean, it's American Thanksgiving, isn't it? I mean, that's the usual standard. If they're not in the mix by that point, if they've somehow had another terrible start to the season, as happened last year. I mean, think about it last year. That's when we really started talking about Travis Green last year. And that was a season that started a little bit later than this one. I can't even remember. It was about the same time, but it was a little, it was a week later or thereabouts. But American Thanksgiving remains the sort of standard, and then most teams in make it, and most teams out don't. And if they're in trouble, then I really got to wonder where they're going to be looking. I don't know. I mean, the other challenge is who's out there to actually, turn the bus around again, if that's at that point. But I just, I think in the end, the team in general will be pretty, I think management will be pretty cautious with the change. But they also know that they have to make the playoffs. And so they can't let, if things go badly, they can't let things run away from themselves. I don't have any, especially when we saw, like I said, I wanted to see them play better, essentially in a two-way sense. And I think they did against Edmonton last week. Obviously the Arizona game was a total write-off. But they won the game handily that they needed to win handily. And they actually impressed everyone with that home win. Against Edmonton last week. So they seem like they're on the right course. They didn't have if they'd come out of the training camp, spring training, preseason 0-7, I think you might be worried, but they weren't. They had a preseason. They kind of they hit all the marks. They've got a challenging road trip, but it's not an impossible road trip.
Wonderful stuff. We're glad you're on our team. It all starts tomorrow. Should be a lot of fun. Thanks for this, PJ. Until next Tuesday.
Indeed, fellas. Talk to you in, I can't even remember where I'll be, Columbus somewhere. Minnesota.
All right.
Columbus.
Well done.
DC. I don't know. I'll be somewhere eastern. Anyway.